Hey guys, what's going on? So in today's tutorial, I actually want to walk through how to build this little form that a user can go in and input, and when they hit submit, it's actually going to tell them whether or not their loan has been approved or rejected. So for those of you who are wondering, I actually created a machine learning model and used Postman, and through the backend uploaded some JSON data to see whether or not the loan was approved or rejected. And if you want to see that, check up above. Also, I should let you know, if you guys want to learn more about machine learning, Python programming, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, because I always have new and amazing content coming out. Alright, so let's put this thing to the test. So what I did is I took our machine learning model from last time, which I'm going to bring over here. And what I've done here is I just wanted to see the average of all the loans that were not approved. So basically I said, let's go ahead and reset my data frame to those ones that were not approved, so that I can get an average idea of what numbers to put in here. Oops, describe. So that we can try to throw this loan off. Alright, so I'm going to use the mean average here, or the mean number, and where possible I'm going to round up or round down. So let's go ahead and start putting some of this information in here. So dependents, I'm going to put 1, applicant income and co-income I'm going to copy, loan amount I'm going to copy, and then the credit history, because it's sitting at 0.57, I'm going to try it with 0, and then I'm going to try it with 1. Let's see what happens. So let me go and put this information in. Alright, and it doesn't say anything about gender, I guess, in this. I should have probably done something around that, but let's just leave this as male, yes, graduated, self-employed, and rural. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. So if you see the mean numbers here, actually go ahead and match what I have in here. So we're going to play with credit history and dependence, because those are the two that are sort of not exactly one. So let's try this. If I hit submit, it's going to say my application was approved. So if I go back, let's just say I change dependence to 0. That shouldn't really change it. It should still say application is approved. But now, what if I go back, let's add this back in and go credit history is equal to 0, which means a pretty bad credit history. It says application is rejected. So that's kind of the stuff we want to see. Now, this machine learning model is not perfect by any means. I've still got to tweak it and play around with it, but at the end of the day, this code is working, and I'm going to show you how to build it right now. So in this week's tutorial, I want to take it a step further, and now what I want to do is I want to be able to create a web form, and that is for a customer to go in and put in their own information, and then as soon as they hit submit, it should tell them right on the bottom whether or not they've been rejected or accepted. And when you think of the applicability of this, I mean, this is some really great stuff you can do with it, because you can build other machine learning models and allow your customers to interact with it. So first and foremost, what I did is under my templates, I created a folder called templates under my API. And this entire folder structure is also covered off in the previous tutorial, so make sure you have a look at that before we go forward. And in that template file, I created another folder called My Form. You're going to see this, but you know what? I'm going to quickly delete this. I'm going to show you how quick it is to generate this. So you have to have an extension called Emmet installed. And when I go ahead and delete this, all I do is I type in the exclamation mark, hit tab, and what it does is it goes and creates a regular HTML file for me, which is pretty cool. But now what we got to do is we just got to go and create a form object below in the body. So here, I'm just going to copy and paste that. And all this is saying is exactly what was in form.html. Method is equal to post. We have our token in there. And so everything else remains the same. But let me go ahead and delete this. And I want to show you how this renders actually when I delete this. So if I were to go here and go back to Safari, you see how it actually just doesn't have any line break. So I just want to show you what line break does. It just creates that. If I didn't show you that the last time, I couldn't remember. So let's add that back in, hit save, re-render this, and now you have a form. The other thing we got to do is I also created a file called forms.py. Now in this, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to say from Django import form. And this is going to be the form file that we're going to use. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create a new form. And for that, we're going to create a class. We're going to call it class approval form. And in this, we're going to use a whole bunch of form objects. So this is very similar to using models. And when we go back to the model one for a second, let me go ahead and just go to models.py here. When we looked at models.py, it's very similar where we're actually using from Django, we're using the models library. And in that, what we're doing is we're using all of the fields that are available within models. And so models has its own methods in there of how to treat things like a char field, how to treat an integer field, and all that other stuff. We're doing the same thing with form, though the form objects are slightly different. There's a few nuances. Like for example, char field still exists, but you can't do a choice using a char field in forms. You have to use something called choice field, which we'll get into in a second. But once you've gone ahead and created that class, now we're going to start importing very similar data to what we had in our models file. So first name is now instead of models, we're going to say form dot char field, and we're going to say max underscore length is equal to 15. So I'm going to go ahead and populate all of these down here below, and then we'll come back and we'll take a look at it because you guys don't really need to see me doing this. All right, so welcome back. So now what we're going to do is I've just gone ahead and I've completed our forms file. And so when you look at some of the differences, so for example, the char fields still stay the same between models. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in models here. I'm just going to copy and paste this. And I'm going to put it under forms, but we're going to delete it after. It's just more for comparison reasons. So when you look at first name, it's very similar. Char field, integer field, all that stuff remains the same. It's really when you get to the choice field. So when I use models, I was able to do models.char field, max length, and define my choices here. But here you actually have to use something called choice field and define your choices this way. I don't know, I tried defining it the original way in models.py, how I had it up here. It was finicky, giving me some errors, so I just decided to follow the docs, and this is how the docs suggest you do it. So if I go back to form.py, this is essentially the main difference. It's really coming down to the choice field where some of those differences come. So let's go ahead and get rid of this. And all I'm doing here is these are the form fields that I want to collect from the user. And so I've just gone ahead and defined some parameters for it. It's also going to make it easy when I take this information in and I start using it. I don't have to define whether it's an integer, whether it's a string or anything like that, because it's all taken care of over here. All right, so once you got forms.py, we're set. Now we're going to go to views. So when I go to views, if you remember last time, I had one project or one method here for approve reject. And what this was doing is I had the API set to actually come into here. It would take the JSON information, pass it in here. I would pre-process that JSON information and then use it in the machine learning model. Well, I'm not going to have my API pass here this time. I'm actually going to go ahead and create a different method for it. And so we're going to go ahead and we're going to call this DF, and I'm going to call this customer contact, just because I can't think of a better name right now. And we're going to pass through the request this time. Now I'm going to show you guys how to use a different way of the request or the post method, sorry. And this is how I literally got this from the docs. So if there's any kind of confusion, you can go ahead and look at the Django docs, which I'll link below as well. But essentially what we're doing is now we're saying we're actually going to tell it how to handle a different request. So I can do something for get requests, I can do something for post, but I'm only worried about post right now because I'm sending data to the server. And so next I'm going to go ahead and define my form object. I'm going to say form is equal to approval form. And in here, what I'm getting, the data that I'm getting is whatever's been posted. So request.post. And so now I'm going to do a check to see if the form is valid. And is valid, just make sure that it's meeting the right criteria when you're entering things in there. Then I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, assuming that the form is valid, I'm going to say first name is equal to form dot cleaned underscore data. And then I'm going to pass through the actual form field in this case, which is first name. And all this is saying is that now that my data is actually cleaned, I want to take that cleaned object and I want to now dedicate that to its own new object here called first name, or variable, sorry, called first name. So I'm going to go ahead and populate the rest of these going below, and then we'll talk about what this is going to tell us. All right, so that was very tedious to go and fill all of this stuff in, but it is what it is. I even tried to do something like an underscore all or something like that, but didn't work. And I didn't see anything like that in the doc. So if you guys are aware, let me know and I'll actually go ahead and update and make a video of it. So what this is saying is that once I've done a post request, I'm going to pass my post information, so whatever I pass through my form. Now I'm going to go ahead and make sure it's cleaned. If it is clean, great. Let me go ahead and allocate it to a new variable, and then I'm going to print those out just for now. I wouldn't keep this print statement long term. If it's not a post method, just return the empty form as it is, because that's what I want to see. I'm going to use something called render, and I'm basically going to return my request, which is going to go into coming from my form object, And the form that I'm using is form because that's what I've defined this as right here. And then the last bit of house cleaning that we need to figure out is when I go to my urls.py, right now I've got some fields going to, so I've got a / API like we talked about last time. We have a status, but I need to go ahead and add in some kind of a path from my form. So we're going to say path form / Now I'm going to direct it to my views dot, and when I go here, remember we created this method here. So we're going to basically send it there. And I'm just going to give it a name, is equal to customer form. All right. So I think we have everything ready. What I want to do now is I want to go ahead and launch a browser. And in this, I'm going to go ahead and do 1.2. All right. And so remember now this time we call this form. So if I go to form, I get nothing. And I wonder why, what's happening. Let's see. Cannot import form from Django. Maybe I called it something that I shouldn't have. And I think I know why. Let's go back to form. And that's because that should be forms, which is why I have forms all the way down here. Let's try that again. So is my server running? Yes, the server's running, so we're good. Let's go ahead and rerun this. So remember, I'm going to / form because if you know in urls.py, I basically defined it as / form. So let's go back to this here. Cool. So now I have a form. All right. So let's try putting in some information. So I'm going to say John Smith has 2 dependents, has an income of $4,500. Co-applicant has an income of $3,000. Loan amount they're looking for is $25,000. Loan term is 360 months. Credit history is 2. And we'll leave all of this same except for, we'll change some things around here. So now that I hit submit, you may be thinking, well, okay, where'd that data go? Well, we actually haven't defined a method yet to take that data. But just to give you some confidence, remember what I said here is when I actually go and run that, I want to return my first name, last name, dependents, married, and area. Well, we can at least see the output of that data, which is right here. So it actually runs in terminal. So John Smith, 2 years or 2 dependents. What was the other question we asked? We said, are they married? Yes. And the area they're living in is urban. So we actually know the form is working and it's actually returning back the information. Now we need to go ahead and say, how do we define a method that's going to take this information in, allow us to process it, and then go ahead and feed it back into this approval reject model, and then run the machine learning algorithm, then go ahead and return back a response to us. So now we're going to do that. So I've been playing around this for a little bit. I made some modifications and they're really minor. All I did is I went and I changed all of these to having a capital or title text. And that's just because that's the way I had defined it in my machine learning model, and I just wanted to be consistent with it. So if I were to show you, this was the machine learning model that I created a couple of weeks back. I'll put the link up for this as well. But when you look at the columns, they've all been capitalized. So I just want to keep it consistent. So really I've done that. So I changed it here in my forms.py. And then when I went to my views.py, I just made sure that all of these are capital as well. So I just kept it consistent really. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to figure out how are we going to get data from our form, go into the background and run a machine learning model against it. Now the one thing to keep in mind is when this data gets submitted to our backend, it's actually not one hot encoded. As you saw earlier, it's actually just printed as it is really. So you'll have the first name, dependent, so just a dictionary with these keys here, and then the values are associated with whatever comes in. But now the question is I have a gap because in my model is actually one hot encoded. So what I've done in this case is I've gone ahead and I've taken the request.post. We know that it's a valid form, so I don't have to worry about that. And I've created a dictionary out of it. This returns back as something called a query dict. And you can't really work with a query dict and a data frame that easily. You have to convert it back to a dictionary, and in Python 3.5 and above, you just use .dict and it creates it into a dictionary. Then what I said is let me take this and let me make this a data frame. And so I've passed in my dict. I've set a index to 0 because this is a scalar. And then I said, okay, I'm going to go ahead and call a couple of functions here. The first function, the inner function, is called one hot encoding value, so OHE value. So in this, I'm actually passing this data frame. And so when you go up here, it's going to go all the way up here. And what it's doing is it's going to take that data frame as a argument in this function. It also knows what my one hot encoded values are based on my machine learning model. So if I were to just come here and show you my one hot encoded values are actually these. So dependent, applicant income, all that stuff stays the same, but this is where you start having your deviation. So you can either be gender male, gender female, married no, married yes, education graduate, education not graduate, and so forth, and have your ones and zeros against it. So really I need to map whatever information I take from my form to this format so that I can use it in my machine learning model. And to do that, all I did is I took my one hot encoded columns, I know what they are, and I said these are the ones that actually need to get one hot encoded, because the other ones are integers, I don't need to worry about it. So I created a dummy database or a dummy data frame, pd.getDummies against it. We're going to pass in this data frame here, which is in the function. And the only columns that I want to go ahead and one hot encode are these ones, which is the ones that I specified. And so that's going to give me a new data frame, which is going to have my one hot encoded values. So now the problem is this is only going to give me one hot encoded values for the information that is in this. So here's what I mean. Let's walk through a quick demonstration. All right, so really the best way to explain this is the machine learning model actually needs all of these different values in there. So it's going to need to know your dependents, your applicant income, and so forth. But remember, the data is also one hot encoded. So if, for example, this person said that they were a female, it would say gender female 1, gender male 0. If they were not married, it would say married NO 1, married yes 0, because that's how the actual one hot encoding works. Now what happens is when I go ahead and I pass in this data frame, which is the form data, so the form data comes in over here and it's saying I'm only going to talk about the information that I know. I know that, this person is a male, I know this person is married, but it doesn't actually have the other values because it's not part of that data set, it's not part of that form data. So actually what's missing from the machine learning model now is the machine learning model doesn't know that this is 0. All of these are 0. It just assumes there's an error and there's not enough data. And so you have to go and one hot encode it and make sure that when your form data comes in, you're combining it with missing data, setting all of this stuff to 0 so that you have a full data set you can feed into your machine learning model. And so that's what this is doing. This is saying that I'm going to go ahead and look at every single column in my one hot encoded column, which is this here. This here. So it's going to go for each one of these over here. It's going to iterate through it. Then it's going to say, okay, if I actually sit in the form data, which is over here, then whatever value is passed in the form, just set that equal to the value for this dictionary column. But if I'm missing, if I'm not part of the form data here, if I'm sitting down here, then just set it equal to 0. And then you create a new data frame out of that, and you return that data frame. So the return data frame that you're going to get is actually going to be a one hot encoded data frame. All right, so you take that, you return it, and you take that back to this original function, and that's what this is going to return. So let me just get rid of this, and you'll see. Let me comment this out, and I actually want to show you on the terminal how this comes out. So right now you're going to see the output on the terminal like you did before. So if I do this, and I do one hot encoded value and I pass in the data frame, here's what we're going to see. So let me bring up the terminal window here. All right, so unfortunately I'm not going to be able to run both at the same time without the terminal window disappearing, but let me just go ahead and clear all this stuff out. So let me close this, clear it out, and let's rerun the server just so we have some clean information here. Okay, cool. So now that means I can go ahead and run this. So let's go to my form. And maybe I can actually do this. Let's see what it shows. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh this form. So right now it just says you've submitted pretty much nothing because half the stuff is empty. So I'm going to say Mark, Paul, dependents, he's got 2, income is that, co-income is that, loan amount is that. And I'm just honestly writing in anything right now. Credit history is 2, and we'll just leave this all at default. And when I hit submit, and you'll actually see it goes ahead and it prints out a data frame for you. So it has your applicant income, property area, suburban, urban. Hopefully we picked rural here, which we did, so that's why it's not coming up. But anyways, these little 3 dots basically say that there's a whole bunch of more data here. So now we have a completely one hot encoded data set. So now the next thing we want to do is now I want to take that information and I want to pass it into my original machine learning model, which is my approval reject. So what I'm going to do here is now if I just uncomment this, what this is saying is pass in that data frame into my approve or reject. So remember, I'm passing in, this is going to be basically my function, one hot encoded data frame. And that's what gets passed over here. And so that, remember, is a data frame. That's a data frame you just saw. So essentially we're taking this data frame and we're passing it into now the machine learning model. The machine learning model is now going to go back and look at the scalars and actually the model itself. So it's going to look at the coefficients for all the different features that we have, but at the same time scale it. I'm going to take my data frame and I'm going to transform it to these scalars that we've basically identified in the original machine learning model. Now I'm going to take my model parameters and I'm going to go ahead and predict against it. I'm going to set the same threshold like I had in my machine learning model. And then I want to replace anything so that if it returns true, make it approved. If it returns false, make it rejected. And then it's going to go ahead and say your status is so forth. So here I took out the JSON response because I don't need a JSON response anymore. I'm not using Postman. But I want to actually show you how this outputs into the terminal. So remember, now we're actually using a front end. We're using a form to fill this information in. So now that I've saved this, what I want to do is just run this same model with the same person. I'm just going to hit back. Now let's see if Mark gets approved or rejected. It should actually tell us in the terminal. So it's running all this stuff and it actually says Mark got approved. All right, so let's run a few more. Let's say Jessica, Roberts, 3 dependents, applicant income is that. That's the co-applicant income, loan amount. Let's say this. Loan term is 344 months. Credit history is 2. She's a female, and we'll leave everything else the same. It's doing its thing in the background, and it says she's approved. Awesome. Let's run another one. Let's say Jason, Park, 4 dependents, applicant income is that. Let's just say something small. Co-applicant income is something small as well. Loan amount we'll say is something small. Now we're going to give this person a credit history of 0. Let's see. So now it actually says rejected. And that's probably because, you have a credit history of 0. But for now, you see that it's actually working. So I'm able to use a front-end form, which is really cool. And now it's giving me all these answers in the back end. Well, now the next question is, how do I put that in some kind of an HTML form or somewhere on an HTML page? All right, so to get this to work, what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and import a library called messages. Okay, so from Django.contrib import messages. Then all I've done is I've taken that big command I had and I just saved it to a variable named answer. And if this form is valid and all this stuff happens, it's going to go ahead and print out a message. So only upon success will it print the message. So it's going to take the request. Then it's going to say my application status. And then it's going to return back my answer. So that's one of the changes I need to do in my views.py file. Now in my second one, I found this snippet of code online and I will put it in the description. But I need to go to my customer form. And basically what this does is it looks to see whether or not there's any messages in my views, which in case there is over here. And what it's going to do is it's going to go ahead and sift through the messages. And it's going to do, for message and so forth. And at the end of the day, it returns it and it renders it in your HTML file. So if I were to go ahead and reprint this, so let me go ahead and bring my console back. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill this out and the answer should pop up right down here. And that's pretty much what I wanted to accomplish. So if I just put in Jack Smith, dependents 3, income is that, co-income is that, loan amount is this, term is 343, credit history is 2. I'm going to leave all this as is. Over here now, when I hit submit, it should go in the back end, run the machine learning model, and then give me the answer. It says application status approved. And that's pretty much what I wanted to run. So let's make this a very disappointing loan. So I'm going to jack this. Well, I'll leave that. You know what? I found credit history is actually a big indicator of whether you're not going to get this. So if this person's got a really bad credit history, it's going to say application status rejected. So now we've actually got our machine learning model doing our Django model, doing what it's supposed to do. It's going into the front end form. It's taking all of this information. It's parsing it. So as that information comes in, it's coming in over here. It's coming in through a post request. We're cleaning up, making sure that everything's valid. The other thing I should show you here is that when I fill this out, let's say I put in letters here. When this is actually defined as a number, it'll give me an error. It'll say actually enter a number. And that's part of also what form clean does, or sorry, is it valid does. And then finally we convert that into a dictionary. We take the answer and we return the answer back in the actual HTML format. So that's really the end of this tutorial, guys. I accomplished what I wanted to get done here, so we're just going to run another one for fun as I'm talking. But, you know, I would say Django is a very interesting framework. I mean, I'm mostly used to programming in PHP just from my background. But I'm actually thoroughly impressed with some of the things that you can do. Now, there is a learning curve with Django. But, you know, once you sort of get past that hump, things start to become a lot more easier. So that's really how you do it. In an upcoming video, I'm actually going to take this form, and maybe I may create a different one. I'm not sure yet. And I'm going to show you how to incorporate Bootstrap into Django as well. We'll make this a lot more prettier. There's other methods you can use, like crispy forms, Django crispy forms, and all that other kind of stuff. But right now, I wanted to just focus on the front end and show you how you can just create a simple link for your users to go ahead and input information, and then it gives them the answer right away. And then we can even save this information to a database. I've chosen not to do it right now, but that could be done as well just by creating a model form. So a lot of possibilities here. Hopefully you enjoyed this tutorial, guys. If you did, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and I will talk to you next time. Thanks. Bye.